Welcome to today's edition of the Rush 24/7 podcast.
Man, oh man, Rex Tillerson arrives today in Russia on a tiny jet. I couldn't believe this when I saw it. He shows up in a Boeing 737. Now, I realize he didn't fly all the way from Washington. There was a G20 meeting somewhere. So it was a short hop to Moscow to Boeing. But I can't believe a U.S. Secretary of State shows up in a puddle jumper jet. Probably to avoid the appearances of grandiosity. And nothing wrong with the Boeing 737, but they normally use Boeing 757s or 767s for cabinet officials in the Veep. Anyway, he's over there in Russia, and he said Russia's, you're either with us or you're with Syria. It's one of the two, and if you're with Syria, you're in trouble. And now the Kremlin has just said that Putin will not sit down for a meeting with Tillerson. Maybe he'll stand, because he's a short guy. And probably no taller than Tillerson when Tillerson's sitting. Don't be fooled by those pictures of Putin wearing no shirt, sitting atop the camel or the horse or whatever it is. Anyway, it's tightening up. There's news, there's conflicting news about whether the Russians knew of the Syrian chemical attack before it happened. And the reason for this is that there was a drone flying around the hospital where the victims of the attack were taken for treatment. And the drone was supposedly a Russian drone being operated by Russian drone operators. That hospital was bombed. The hospital where victims of Assad's chemical weapons attack was bombed. The reason it was bombed was to get rid of the victims and any evidence that gas, sarin, and so forth had been used. Now, Pentagon people say Russian didn't know. They didn't know. It's a really big conflict here. We're still not sure. The AP claiming that we did know that we think that the Russians did know before the attack and therefore didn't do anything to stop it. And others, no, we didn't know. So we have to sift through that. I've had three people today. Three people. One of whom was the official program observer. The other two via text message. One of them is, I hope Trump counts to 1,000 before he launches on North Korea. Another text message says, oh my God, Rush, could this really happen? Could we really be preparing to launch on North Korea? And Mr. Snerdley came and said, I'm really worried about this North Korea thing. And I looked at him and I said, what's everybody so concerned about here? This little Kim guy had been launching his putrid little missiles trying to hit us for how many years now? And then his father prior to that. And they keep plunking in the Pacific Ocean someplace. Look, keep aiming, little Kim. I think our message is keep aiming, little Kim. And if you get close to us, you're going to pay the price for it. The North Koreans should have been taken out years ago. Clinton should have taken them out. You remember Madeleine Albright and some of the ridiculous things she said about the North Koreans, and then it continued with the Bush administration really just huffed and puffed. I think what Trump is employing, and you leftists ought to love this, I think Trump is employing the madman strategy. I think he's trying. These are genuine madmen in North Korea. These people are literally off the charts insane. And it might be something as simple as inbreeding. Who the hell knows? These people are odd. You have to admit it, folks. And so Trump may be thinking, you know what? I'm going to make them think I'm unpredictable. I'm going to make them think that I am a madman. I'm going to reverse the table on them. And I'm going to make them think I'm the one that's unpredictable because they have been able to launch their putrid little missiles here for decades with the knowledge that nobody's going to do anything about it. I'm not worried a bit about. I don't worry much anyway, but I'm not worried about this. And when I find that most people who are worried because of what they think the Chi-Coms will do if we do strike the Norks. And there's a story out there today that the Chi-Coms have moved 150,000 troops into position that is said to be battle ready in the event we do hit the North Koreans. But here, yet again, the Pentagon is denying this. There is so much BS in the news. Apparently, our government, the Trump administration, is saying that there are not 150,000 Chinese troops anywhere, that you can't secretly do that. If you start moving everything necessary to support, you don't just move 150,000 bodies. You have to move all kinds of support facilities. You got to have hospitals. You got to have medics. You have to have food. You've got to have what? You can't do that clandestinely. And it hasn't been spotted, but there are sources saying that it has happened. And by the way, folks, what happened? What has happened to the story that Trump colluded with the Russians to screw Hillary, not figuratively, not literally, out of the election? Have you seen anything on that in 2 days? Did you hear anything about that on Sunday? It may be 3 days now. Not a whisper, not a whiff. There's not even any bzz, 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 not any buzz about it. This is one of the most recent classic definitions of drive-by media. If you've wondered what that means, we're looking at it. How many months, certainly prior to the election in November, but most definitely since then, we have had, you can't count them, so many stories every day about Trump colluding with the Russians and the Russians colluding with Trump to sabotage the American election. There's no other explanation for why Hillary lost. It has to be that Trump colluded with the Russians. The Russians somehow, we've had these deep state leaks from these intelligence sources saying this and that and all that, but every story has to make the point deep, way down to the story, there's no evidence yet. The investigation's continuing. The Democrats say precisely because there's no evidence, we need to keep investigating. 3 days, we haven't heard diddly squat. What happened to it? Well, yeah, Trump hit Syria. Syria is a Russian client state, and that goes a long way to disproving the idea that Trump and Putin are buddies and colluding for Putin's benefit, because that's what they say the collusion is all about, that Trump's a rank amateur and a rookie, and Putin's this Machiavellian-type leader that has Trump twisted around his little finger, and yet here's Tillerson telling these guys one way or the other, if you don't get out of Syria, if you don't stop this, we're going to hold you responsible too. So the story's gone. We haven't seen Pencil Neck on TV in 3 days. Adam Schiff, House Democrat, ranking member of the intelligence community, perfect definition of drive-by media. They show up. They get everybody all worked up. They intensely focus on one thing and don't stop pounding it. And in one day, they stop and they move on to something else. And what did they move on to? What they moved on to is Trump and Syria and Trump and North Korea. And oh no, Trump's going to destroy the world. Oh my God. Oh my. And they've moved on, ladies and gentlemen, to America's domestic skies. Latest big news of the day. So United has a flight from Chicago to Louisville. And on this flight are going to be 4 employees of United who have to get to Louisville to work a flight coming out of Louisville. This necessitated United Airlines pulling 4 passengers off the flight. It was fully booked and oversold. The airline industry may be the only, and I'm not sure about this, but it may be the only industry that oversells. Like, do theaters oversell seats? Do sports stadiums oversell seats, and they sell 2 seats to, 1 seat to 2 different people or 3 for the Super Bowl? It doesn't happen. Now, we know that the airlines do it because there are cancellations, people don't show up. And when the overbooked, oversold situation happens, and this is the case at United, they first offered bribes. They offered $400 and overnight accommodations to any volunteers that would get off the plane. No takers. They upped the offer to $800 and maybe a suite at Motel 6. And no takers. There were no takers. Nobody wanted to get off the plane. So they randomly chose 4 passengers. We're only hearing about one of them. And man, oh man, have we learned a lot about this guy. More on that in just a moment. Now, the CEO of United, who just won an award for corporate spokesmanship, for corporate PR. This is unbelievable. The guy just is Oscar Munoz. And he just won an award as one of the best corporate communicators in the world of corporate communication. And he said, I apologize for having to reaccommodate these customers. Reaccommodate these customers? There you have totally politically correct corporate speak. Well, one of the 4 passengers refused to get off. They had to drag the guy off. He was a doctor. He is a doctor. And he said he had to make the flight because he had patients waiting on him in Louisville the next day. So he had to get to Louisville. But he was randomly chosen. So they dragged him off the plane. And they bring their 4 employee flight attendants and others who have to make that flight to work the next flight out of Louisville. And somehow this guy ends up back on the plane. That really ticked him off. Apparently this guy, having been removed, found his way, he snuck back in there with the United employees, and that's when things got rough. So they sent the uniformed security people in to drag the guy. He refuses to go. Some passengers videotaped it. Others just watched and did nothing, which is causing some angst and concern in some quarters. And the guy gets dragged off, and at the end of all of this, he's bloodied, and his glasses are down around his mouth and nose, and he's shouting, no, no, please, no more. And he looks like he's been tortured at Abu Ghraib or Club Gitmo. The guy looks like he's been beat up, and the video of this has gone viral, and now everybody in the country, instead of hating Comcast, now hates United. Well, I saw a survey, the most hated company in America among millennials. I've tried to tell you this is Comcast. Millennials hate cable companies because they charge money. Millennials want things like their entertainment to be free. So anyway, people can't believe that United did this. What United is saying, United Flight 3411, what United is saying is that established procedures were followed here. And the problem is nobody has seen these established procedures before. But what they are further saying is the passenger was belligerent. And when passengers get belligerent for whatever reason, then we don't wait. We remove them, whatever it takes, because that becomes a security problem. Other passengers could be injured. We're not going to tolerate unruly behavior from any passenger, not even one who has refused to get off the plane and then did get off and has snuck back in there. No patience, no tolerance for unruly passengers. That's their story. They're going to stick with it. They will hope to ride this out. That's why I was trying to help here with my ad campaign idea that they might next try to employ. Now, who is this guy? Oh, there's another element. The guy happens to be Chi-Com. So, well, I'm sorry, he has to be Chinese. So now, naturally, in our overly litigious, politically correct, cowardice little culture, there's racism. Yes, indeed, United was racist. We've even got some clown, John Cho, who I never heard of until today. He's an actor. He's played in some of the sequels to Star Trek, played the character Sulu. This guy says that this only happened because of Trump. John Cho says that the forced removal of the United Airlines passenger can be traced to Donald Trump. He said it's hard not to see a connection between the environment Trump has created and what happened on that United flight. That's how ridiculous this got. But who is this guy? Well, the New York Post has dug deep, as has the UK Daily Mail. This is going to further anger people because now it looks like the victim is being targeted and blamed. I'll give you the details when we get back. Okay, the unruly United Airlines passenger that was physically removed from the plane twice is a doctor. According to the UK Daily Mail, he is a felon who traded prescription drugs for secret gay sex with his patients and took the drugs himself. And he also needed anger management courses. He was not forthright and had control issues, said a psychiatrist. His name is Dr. David Dow, D-A-O. His troubled medical past is revealed in court documents. His wife, also a doctor, reported him to medical authorities, and his secret, inappropriate gay relationship with a patient was revealed. Well, the guy was really desperate to get back to Louisville. He's a father of 5, convicted of a felony, voided prison time because he was giving the man prescription drugs in return for gay sex. He denied the gay sex thing, even though he's caught on camera shirtless and in his pants. It was the Putin look. The views expressed by the host on this program documented to be almost always right, 99.8% of the time. And greetings, my friends. Welcome. Rush Limbaugh here at the Limbaugh Institute for Advanced Anti-Leftist Studies. There are no graduates and there are no degrees because the education and learning never stops. If you want to be on the program, it's 800-282-2882. If you want to send an email, lrushbo@eibnet.us. So what do you make, folks? We've got the UK Daily Mail and the New York Post, and I'm sure other publications too, have now written stories on who this unruly passenger is. And it's not a pretty picture. And they portray a guy here who's had to see psychiatrists for drug addiction and anger management issues. And he nearly lost his medical license. One doctor wrote that the guy here, Dr. David Dow, would unilaterally choose to do his own thing. He only got his medical license back after agreeing to be drug tested and polygraphed. What's going to happen here now is that numerous people are going to get angry that the victim is being blamed and smeared in the process in order to defend United, this is USA Today. United Airlines CEO doubles down, says employees followed procedures. Flyer was belligerent. Going forward, that's going to be what the airline falls back on. Belligerent passengers are removed from airplanes every day. You just don't hear about it anymore, but it happens every day. Belligerent passengers are, this is one thing. Particularly in the post-9/11 world, the airlines will not tolerate. There's no tolerance. There's no patience for it. If you're belligerent, if you're abusive, fellow passengers or flight crew member, they get you out of there. And that's what happened to this guy. He snuck back in there somehow with the 4 United employees who were going to take the seats of the 4 people who were asked to leave, and nobody did, so they were randomly chosen. And by the way, on that score, these are flight attendants and others who had to be in Louisville so that a scheduled United flight the next day could fly. Without a crew, they'd have to ground that airplane or cancel that flight. That's a lot of money. I would be very hesitant if I were you, if you're inclined to blame that flight crew, those 4 people that were ordered on that plane by the company. They're employees. So if United tells them they got to take that flight to, I've had comments in social media have said things like, that flight crew, they should have just driven. Not that far from Chicago to Louisville, just drive. Not an option. That's up to the airline. The airline wanted them to fly, get them to Louisville. There were crew rest issues too, and I think they were on the verge of the limits there. Tell you the truth, some of these crew members, if what I'm reading about this is accurate, had put in longer than the normal day. They had to get to Louisville to have some overnight rest in order to legally be able to work the flight out of Louisville the next day. But belligerent, and the USA Today headline, United Airlines CEO doubles down, says employees follow procedures, flyer was belligerent. I don't know if that's actually what they're going to hang with here as this goes forward. but it's obviously a PR nightmare. Now, what did I do with it? I just printed this. This is not going to make you happy, ladies and gentlemen. And here it is. And I must admit this is puzzling. Who won the House in November? The Republicans. And who won the Senate in November? That'd be the Republicans. And who won the White House in November? That would be the Republicans. So there is a story out today that there's no way that the Republicans are going to be able to actually put together a budget for the rest of the year. Instead, what's going to happen is another omnibus spending bill. When you hear the word omnibus, there's a word you need to use, and it's called catch-all. It's a catch-all spending bill that will take the government through the end of September this year, maybe the end of October. And they're just going to throw whatever they need to operate the government at current baseline levels. There's going to be no budget discipline. There isn't going to be any attempt. There aren't going to be any attempts to cut spending or any of that. And this is just, it's going to infuriate people. The Republicans won for express reasons, and many of them include reducing the scope of government, the reach of government, the size of government, to get spending under control. And it looks like no effort is even going to be made. And then Breitbart just dropped this story this morning. GOP leaders dropping border wall funds, says report. Federal funding for Trump's premier policy proposals may be excluded from the House GOP budget for fiscal year 2017-218. That's not the omnibus. The budget for fiscal year 2017-218 would start in October. The omnibus is just enough to get us through the rest of this fiscal year. House Democrats, along with a few House Republicans, are working around the clock to make sure that funding for the estimated $12 billion border wall is not factored into the GOP budget, according to a report by thehill.com. Now, that's a caveat. When it's reported by Inside the Beltway Drive-By Media, you have to pause, and you have to say, is this true? I have no doubt that there are members of the House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats, who are telling reporters, nah, no money for the wall. We don't believe in the wall. We're not going to authorize that. There isn't going to be any wall, and there isn't going to be money for the wall. And I would not doubt the media running with it, but it may not be official. It may just be part of an overarching plan to deny Trump what he promised during the campaign. Because believe me, despite everything else going on, that too is still going on. Now, the report in The Hill said with Democrats united against the new wall funding, it's unlikely the Republicans have the votes to get it through and prevent a government shutdown. And here we are again. We've arrived at that precious moment where yet another government shutdown is out there on the horizon. And whenever we hear government shutdown, what do Republicans hear? Never, no way, can't do it. We are going to get blamed. The American people don't like their government shutdown, and we always get blamed for it because the media is always going to side with the Democrats, even though the Democrats would be responsible for it in this case. And make no mistake, the Democrats, if there's a government shutdown, it's their doing. But they know the media is going to blame Republicans. And I think this is the greatest Republican fear in all of Washington. And there's a lot of them. There are many things elected Republicans are afraid of, but government shutdown sends them into abject panic. And they will do anything to avoid even the appearance of a government shutdown where they get blamed for it. And so as to avoid a government shutdown, there cannot be any funding for the wall. There's too much opposition to it. It would cause too much disagreement. We wouldn't have unity on the budget. Therefore, we would have a government shutdown. Therefore, no wall. no funding for the wall. We have a quote here. Will Hurd, Republican Texas, and Martha McSally, Republican Arizona, are two Republican lawmakers teaming with Democrats to stop the funding of the border wall, despite both of them representing districts that share a border with Mexico. Hurd and McSally wrote to the Trump administration a letter, and they said, we recognize the need for robust border security and infrastructure to ensure public safety and increase cross-border commerce. We also have an obligation to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. Establishment Republicans in the Senate, like Senator McCain, are also teaming with Democrats to stop the wall, with McCain worrying more about the sentiment that Mexicans have toward Americans. He doesn't want to make the Mexicans mad. He doesn't want to hurt the Mexicans' feelings. He doesn't want the Mexicans mad at us. McCain said during a Senate hearing, there's a lot of anti-American sentiment in Mexico. If the election were tomorrow in Mexico, you're probably have a left-wing anti-American president there. That can't be good for America. That's a major shift in tone from McCain in his 2010 re-election. So anyway, the threat here of not having a real budget, having an omnibus, no money for the border wall, none of that, makes up the news of the day on the budget side. And this is going to just provide another little challenge here for the Trump administration to overcome. A quick timeout. Back with much more after this. Do any of you know the name Peter Allis? Peter, A-L-L-I-S. He's now 86. He is a golf commentator for the BBC, and he has over the years, not for a while, but he used to do commentary ABC when they had golf. They used to have the U.S. Open and some other tournaments. And he's exactly the kind of uppity establishment Brit that you would think, especially in the upper crust, the blue bloods of golf clubs over there. He's still doing commentary now and then for the BBC. He was in Augusta doing commentary for the Masters. And did you all watch it when they showed the shots of Sergio Garcia's fiancée? You didn't see that? Well, then this isn't going to mean anything to you. Sergio is engaged. His fiancée used to work at the Golf Channel. She plays golf herself. And she was wearing what looked like to me to be blue shorts, but turns out it was a very short blue skirt. So Peter Allis on the BBC just says, while she's on camera at the 18th green watching Sergio come in, makes a comment, well, there's the shortest skirt in the arena today, and he's in trouble for misogyny. He is in trouble for sexism, for commenting, and he didn't say anything negative about it. He was just addressing what you couldn't miss if you saw it yourself. As I say, it looked like a pair of shorts. I just can't believe it. This guy, they're dumping all over this guy in the UK for misogyny and sexism. He violated political correctness, not supposed to comment on such things. He didn't say anything critical, at least not that I read anyway. Man, if you can't do that, I mean, if you can't comment on what you see without even in any editorial comment, for crying out loud. Anyway, let me go to the phones. We got people lined up here ready to go, and we start with William in Bozeman, Montana, a pilot with United Airlines. William, great to have you on the program, sir. Hello.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Limbaugh. Mega airline captain dittos from God's country. How you doing today?
Very, very fine, thank you. What aircraft do you fly?
I fly for United Express, and I fly the Embraer 170 and 175 version.
That's the plane involved here, and it was the United Express flight.
It's the exact same thing.
Right, okay.
My initial thoughts on this, Mr. Limbaugh, is that people have forgotten that flying is a privilege, and that with that privilege there come rules. And these are rules that are set forth by the FAA, by Transportation Security Administration, by the airlines themselves. And we have multiple venues where you can see where these rules are posted, but people choose not to do that. And then when it comes down to the point that we as crew members have to enforce these rules, we look like the bad guy. You notice in this YouTube video, this posting, whatever it is, that they don't show this guy being non-compliant, because I can guarantee you half a dozen times before he was removed from the aircraft, there were crew members, there were gate agents, there were people trying to tell him, respectfully, sir, you need to remove yourself from the aircraft.
Now, the impression is that when they first approached him, they beat him up. I mean, that is what the impression that people are left with is, that he was asked to leave, he refused to, so they beat him up, and then he snuck back on, and then they really got mad. And
well,
they
yeah,
dragged him out
on
there.
an airplane post 9/11, Mr. Limbaugh, you're going to get hurt. I'm sorry. There's going to be a plane full of people that are not going to put up with that anymore.
It's interesting to look at the video you cite, the one on YouTube. You have the people that videotaped it on their phones, that videoed it, which questionable legality there, but nobody's going to get in trouble for it. You had a lot of people who just sat there and didn't do anything, and probably, as you say, just wish whatever was going on could end so they could leave. They wanted to get where they were going. But you're right, there isn't any video of the guy being roughed up, where people are speculating that he got bloody in the terminal somewhere after they removed him the first time, and then they're dragging him out of there, his face bangs up against the seats. You know, they're speculating on how the guy's mouth ended up bloody and so forth.
Yeah, well, you know, and to be honest with you, Mr. Limbaugh, it comes down to the fact that there are rules, and as a crew member, as an airline captain, I don't have a choice on whether or not I'm going to enforce these rules. There were 4 crew members. Look at the Delta incident last week and the fact that we had 4, 5, 6 days of rolling chaos at Delta because we couldn't get crews to where they needed to be. So we need to have those seats open for crew members.
That was because of weather in one hub, right? Atlanta caused all that problem.
It was weather for a couple of days in Atlanta, and then I was flying in and out of LaGuardia on the Delta side last Thursday and Friday, and it was pretty brutal there too. So it was rolling chaos is what that is. But at the end of the day, we have to look at the bigger picture, and we have to move crew members from point A to point B so that, like you said earlier, we can start tomorrow fresh with a fresh airplane, a fresh crew that's well rested, so that we can provide a service for 8, 10, 12 flights that are going to be happening that next day, which is going to impact hundreds, if not thousands, of passengers.
Now, it looks like the United CEO, or the United corporate, is really focusing on the fact the passenger was belligerent, and that, therefore, justifies or explains, once a passenger goes belligerent, gets unruly, that's the end of tolerance. You get them out of there.
It's there's kind of a little saying that non-compliance on the ground becomes a huge deal at altitude, right? When we sit there and we bring people on board and we're going to bring them up to 7 miles above the earth and fly at 4/5 the speed of sound, there's not a whole lot of there's virtually no tolerance at that point. If you're going to make a big deal of something minor on the ground, who knows what's going to happen when you get in the air? Who knows if you're going to order a beer from one of my flight attendants, and now that's just enough liquid courage that you're now beating on the cockpit door. We have to take this stuff very, very seriously because it has to do with the lives and the safety of the people on that aircraft and the lives and the safety of people who are on the ground. And it's a zero-sum game. There is no tolerance.
William, thank you. I'm out of time, but I appreciate that. That's William from Bozeman, Montana. He's a pilot for United, flies the same airplane involved in this episode. Okay, the latest on Syria, the latest on the Norks and the Chaycoms, Tillerson in Moscow, Putin says he will not sit down for a meeting with Tillerson, our Secretary of State. And there's all kinds of stuff out there, including I'm going to get to this millennial stuff that I have been putting off for the last 3 days. That's coming up as well. When you look at this headline, this is in the Washington Post. Was that doctor dragged off the United Airlines flight because he was Asian? Many in China think so. Well, big whoop. Many in China think so? Are you kidding me? They dragged him off because he was Chi-Com? How about the fact that United celebrates diversity and let him on because he was Chi-Com? This is the kind of stuff. This is the kind of so-called news that does everything it can to keep people at war with one another and just this shrinking away from any involvement anywhere in the culture lest somebody write this about them. Hey, greetings and welcome back, my friends. It's great to have you. Rush Limbaugh here behind the golden EIB microphone. Our telephone number, if you want to be on the program, 800-282-2882. Grab audio soundbite number 24. This is Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State. Man, is this guy, I told you, when they chose Tillerson for Secretary of State, I just want to remind you, I was all in from day one. The guy looks like he's right out of Central Casting. He sounds right out of Central Casting. He looks made for the part. He looks like he was born to it. The guy comes from the oil industry, and that means he's had dealings with everybody around the world. It's also in the oil industry, and that would include Russia. So he knows all these guys before, and he's had to be tough with them. He's had to be however he had to be, depending on the situation. And since he has no prior government experience, a lot of people think, oh, my gosh, this is a lad. We need somebody from the Ivy League. We need somebody with proper training. We need somebody who's been an undersecretary to an undersecretary to second assistant undersecretary. We need somebody with some sort of diplomacy experience and skills having Secretary of State. We can't have some out-of-control oil exec who's trying to destroy the planet as Secretary of State. Now, how much sense does that make? An oil industry executive trying to destroy the planet. Like Republicans want dirty water, dirty air. They want your kids to die of being poisoned. May as well just give them peanut butter if they have an allergy. Some of the most ridiculous, absurd claims. And do you remember, shortly after Tillerson was named Secretary of State, the media tried to hang the fact that Tillerson had done deals with Putin, and that Tillerson and Putin were big friends and they'd worked together before. And they wanted to hang around Tillerson's neck all kinds of things because he was going to end up being nothing more than a Putin puppet. Because he'd worked with Putin at Exxon, and Exxon had to get permission, had to work, had to give Putin deals that he wanted in order for Exxon to function in areas that Putin and Russia controlled. You know, what was really going on was that the Russians were trying to commandeer, steal any which way they could get ExxonMobil drilling technology, so that they can penetrate the Siberian permafrost. There's a lot of oil under there. Exxon knows how to go get oil where it is. The Russians don't. And they were trying to, Putin has always been trying to make deals with Tillerson. But the point was that Tillerson was just outclassed by somebody like Putin who's just going to be giving things away. This made no sense. And it fed into this crazy story that there was collusion between Trump and Russia to steal the election from Hillary, and Putin was just a part of that. Well, in Lucca, Italy, and by the way, this is why Tillerson arrived in Moscow on a 737. Now, it said United States of America. It was a government jet. But, you know, the Forest Service guys fly around on one of those. I can't believe the Secretary of State but it was a short hop. So they showed Putin, Tillerson's plane landing, but before he departed Italy, Lucca, Italy, at the G7 summit, Tillerson spoke about U.S. relations with Russia, and this is just 12 seconds of what he said.
Russia has really aligned itself with the Assad regime, the Iranians, and Hezbollah. Is that a long-term alliance that serves Russia's interest?
Now, we are going to, in a minute, contrast this with Obama and his relationship with Russia, because if you want to know, folks, you know what we know now, or what we've always known, that the real collusion with Russia was Barack Obama and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton. That was the real collusion. And guess what? We were subordinating ourselves. Obama and Kerry and Clinton were subordinating the United States to Putin's wishes. In terms of nuclear disarmament, we were deferring to Russia because Obama was hell-bent on Iran becoming a major player in the Middle East. Now, just on that basis alone, stop and think of that. Our foreign policy when it came to Iran with Obama was to build Iran up. That's why the Iran nuclear deal. The Israelis were scratching their heads. They couldn't figure it out. Nobody could figure it out. It didn't make any sense. Why in the world do we want to build the Iranians up? And right there they are, client states of Russia, just as Syria is. And that's what Tillerson's doing here. We would have never had Obama call them out this way. We had Obama sidling up to them, as in an open mic exchange with Dmitry Medvedev, where Obama said, you tell Vladimir I'll have more flexibility after the election. This was in 2012. And he was talking about the flexibility to reduce our nuclear stockpiles. It wasn't happening as fast as Putin wanted. I'm not making this up. I mean, it's unreal. So Putin is called out here by Tillerson. Russia has really aligned itself with the Assad regime, the Iranians, and Hezbollah. They've thrown them in there. That's clearly identifying Russia as allied with terror groups. That's what Iran is, a terror state. So is Syria. And Tillerson is making no bones about it. And then asks if that's a long-term alliance that Russia finds to be in its interest, which led to a reaction from Putin this morning in Moscow. He was talking about the crisis in Syria.
We say that this resembles very much the situation of 2003 and the war in Iraq. First of all, there was a campaign launched in Iraq, and it finished with the destruction of the country, the growth of the terrorist threat, and the emergence of ISIS on the international arena.
Now, how about that? This, in a way, it reminds me of the way the old Iranian president used to speak, that old Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. When this guy spoke, you could have sworn it was the Democrat Party speaking. I'm not kidding. During the 2012 campaign, he was still the president of Iran. They tossed him out because even he got a little bit too much to explain for the radical mullahs that actually run the country. So Ahmadinejad, he was sent off to some think tank in Iran, which is effectively a prison. I'm laughing about. He's not sent to a prison, but he was disempowered, shall we say, and somebody else appointed to be the figurehead leader of Iran. But whenever Ahmadinejad would speak about the United States and George W. Bush, it was identical to what the Democrat Party was saying. I remember observing that countless times, and now here's Putin doing it. Vladimir Putin says, you know what? This resembles the attack, Trump's attack in Syria. This resembles very much the situation of 2003 in the war in Iraq. There was a campaign launched in Iraq, and it finished with the destruction of the country, the growth of the terrorist threat, and the emergence of ISIS in the international arena. And so Putin is trying to capitalize on Democrat Party rhetoric. This is exactly the way the Democrats blamed and described Bush. Never mind the fact that Democrats supported the war in Iraq at first for 2 years, and then they pretended they never did. Ditto Hillary Clinton. The only reason ISIS came into being is not because of George W. Bush, it's because of Barack Obama. Obama pulled out of Iraq after we had successfully engaged there, well, with limited success, basically left Iraq as a stateless, with a weak to non-existent government, making it easy for ISIS to move in. That's all on Obama. None of that's on George W. Bush. But now here's Putin playing to the American left and playing to the American media, claiming that Trump is simply reenacting the failed Iraq policy, this time in Syria. And this is going to give ammunition to the media and the Democrats to go after Trump. And they're going to try to make him the next George W. Bush. It isn't going to work because Trump's not going to sit there and put up with it. But they're still attempting to do this. Now, Rich Lowry has done a great piece of work here at National Review. Turns out Obama was the real Russian stooge. All of this that Lowry writes about is known and has been known, but it was known and reported on, discussed piecemeal fashion. What Rich has done here is put it down in a page and a half in almost chronological order in as simple and understandable a way as possible. And he has a very clever beginning of the piece. The circumstantial evidence is mounting that the Kremlin succeeded in infiltrating the U.S. government at the highest levels. Now, the hoi polloi and the great unwashed reading that are obviously going to think that Lowry is talking about the Russians colluding with Trump to beat Hillary. The circumstantial evidence is mounting that the Kremlin succeeded in infiltrating the U.S. government at the highest levels. How else to explain a newly elected president looking the other way after an act of Russian aggression? How else to explain an American president agreeing to a farcically one-sided nuclear deal? How else to explain mercilessly mocking the idea that Russia represents our foremost geopolitical foe? Let me take each one of these. How else to explain a newly elected president looking the other way after an act of Russian aggression? That's Obama and Crimea. That's Obama and Ukraine. And that's Assad. At every step of the way, when Putin commits an act of aggression, Obama said, you better cut it out. You better stop doing it. In Syria, he drew a red line and dared Assad to cross it. Assad crossed the red line. Putin kept acting aggressive. Nothing was done to stop it. Agreeing to a farcically one-sided nuclear deal, that's Iran. Agreeing that the region's number one terror state will be permitted to develop nuclear power under terms of an agreement with the American president. That's Obama. That is not Trump. And mercilessly mocking the idea that Russia represented our foremost geopolitical foe. That's the presidential campaign of 2012 when Mitt Romney was doing everything he could to convince people that Russia was a foremost enemy. And it was Obama and his team mocking Romney for seeing a communist behind every rock, making a mountain out of a molehill, and being stereotypical in his foreign policy. It was Obama at every stage of the way, aiding and abetting and facilitating Putin and the Russians. But we're not through. How else to explain a newly elected president accommodating the illicit nuclear ambitions of a Russian ally? Of a president, an American president, welcoming a Russian foothold in the Middle East. Hello, Syria. Hello, Iran. How about an American president refusing to provide arms to a sovereign country invaded by Russia? Hello, Ukraine. An American president diminishing our defenses and pursuing a Moscow-friendly policy of hostility to fossil fuels. That would be Obama and climate change, which benefits Putin and the Russians. All of these items, of course, refer to things said or done by Barack Hussein Obama, not by Donald Trump. To take them in order, Obama reset with Russia shortly after its clash with Georgia in 2008. He concluded the New START agreement with Moscow that reduced our nuclear forces, but not theirs. When Mitt Romney warned about Russia in the 2012 campaign, Obama rejected him as a Cold War relic. The president then went on to forge an agreement with Russia's ally Iran to allow it to preserve its nuclear program and develop it. During the Red Line fiasco, he eagerly grasped a lifeline from Russia at the price of accepting its intervention in Syria. Obama never budged on giving Ukraine lethal weapons to defend itself from Russian attack, which we had sworn by treaty to do. We were the ones that made Ukraine give up its military in exchange for our defending them against such aggression. Then when the aggression happened and they had no weaponry to defend themselves, we sided with the aggressor, Russia. All of this, Barack Obama. Not a single instance of this collusion can be laid at Donald Trump because he was not even running for president when this stuff happened. The evidence of Kremlin, Moscow, and Washington collusion is with Obama and Putin. Finally, Obama cut U.S. defense spending and cracked down on fossil fuels, a policy that Russia welcomes since its economy depends on high oil prices. So it is abundantly clear that if anybody in our country was working with Russia to their benefit, it was Barack Obama and the Democrat Party. It was not Donald Trump. So all of this business about Russia and Trump colluding to deny the election, it would have made every bit of sense in the world for Putin to want Hillary Clinton to win to continue just this kind of deference. With this evidence and using common sense guided by intelligence, there is no way Putin would want to deal with some newcomer like Trump who was talking tough, America first and all this sort of stuff. He would much rather prefer Hillary Clinton, guaranteed to continue the same appeasement policies of Barack Obama as she was promising to do. And we'll be back. The constraints of time are such that the programming format defers to a timeout. Back in a moment. Okay, Palm Harbor, Florida, as we head back to the phones on the EIB network. It's Jake, and it's great to have you here, Jake. How are you?
I'm very good, sir. Thank you. My comments go back to what you were talking about in the first hour with they're not going to be able to find a way to pass a budget, and there's not going to be any money to build a wall.
Right. GOP leaders dropping border wall funds, says report.
Yeah, well, my little word of advice for them is since Donald Trump told us what he was going to do and the support that he had, we were able to temporarily slow down the destruction of the country with the Supreme Court. The second thing for me was building the wall or border security. If they don't do those two things, there will be a bloodbath, and us silly Trump supporters will not put an X beside a Republican's name in the upcoming midterms. I can guarantee it.
Well, just a theoretical question here. If the only people on the ballot are Republican, Democrat in this election you're talking about, as it's a Republican that did not vote to help Trump, who do you vote for?
Well, at this point, it doesn't seem to make any difference because we've given the Republicans everything they wanted for the last 4 years, and they have done absolutely nothing with it. So, to quote Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make?
Well, I'm going to tell you a theory of mine, and I've been thinking about this for a while. I think this Republican Party resistance to Trump was predictable. I think I even did predict it. The Democrat Party resistance, you don't even need to predict it. It's as natural as the fact that we're all alive. The Republican resistance, I think it's going to go on until they become convinced of what you say. But the way they're going to become convinced is not polling or any of that. I think it's going to take some time before everybody in Washington actually comes to grips with the fact that Trump is actually president and is not temporary, and this is not some kind of aberration. And all of this hinges on Trump continuing to be Trump and hanging in. I'm out of time here. I need to expand on this. I think they're eventually going to come around. Right now, it's typical the Beltway resist this, and maybe it isn't happening. Now look, my belief has not changed. There's still many people in the Republican establishment who do not want Donald Trump to succeed. Folks, that hasn't changed. Notwithstanding the Syria attack, even though they're all saying they're on board and yuck supporting it and so forth, there's still lots of people there do not want Trump to succeed, even if it means the Republican Party doesn't succeed for a while. That's a secondary concern to making sure Trump doesn't succeed. At some point, that's going to burn off. It'll never burn off on the Democrat side, because they're not only predisposed to agreeing with Republicans, no matter who the Republicans are, about anything. The Democrats are totally focused on retaining, regaining power, and denying the Republicans and Trump anything. They're never going to say. But the Republicans, I think, at some point will come to accept it. And however they define Trump finally becoming president, Trump finally cementing himself as for real and there and not going anywhere, that realization is going to hit him. I think there's a lot of people still dealing with the fact that they can make this temporary, that they can somehow, they don't know specifics. We're not talking impeachment. I'm just some people dreaming that something's going to happen. Trump's going to quit. He's just going to get tired of it. They can force this to happen or what have you. They don't know who they're dealing with. They still haven't the slightest idea who they're dealing with. There is going to be health care reform at some point, and Trump's going to see it. There is going to be a wall. And if it requires tariffs on Mexican goods, to pay for it, there's going to be a wall. Trump is going to do these things. He wasn't just talking to hear his head rattle. I don't know how all this stuff's going to manifest itself. There's a special election in Kansas today. I have to tell you this. You know, I'm on the mailing list for Jonathan Martin, who's a reporter at the New York Times. He used to be at Politico, and that's how I'm on the mailing list. I used to communicate email back and forth. He would email me asking for a quote on something, treating me, as he should, a source authority. When he got to the New York Times, treating me as a source authority ceased and desisted. But he still sends me his stuff. So he has a story in the New York Times today about the special election in Kansas, and I got the link to it last night. And I'm telling you that the entire Washington establishment, led by the media, is looking at this special election with laser-like focus. This is the seat that was held by Mike Pompeo. Mike Pompeo is now the CIA director, so the seat is open, necessitating this special election. It is in a district that encompasses part of Wichita, which happens to be where the Koch brothers are. Koch Industries is the world headquarters is in Wichita, Kansas. Charles Koch lives there and is still there. David Koch, the other Koch brother, gallivants around New York. But Charles Koch is still there. And they have another brother, Bill Koch, who is here. He's got the most phenomenal wine and won the America's Cup way back when. Great guy. Anyway, I don't know that the Koch brothers have anything to do with this. But Martin's story and the media are hoping that the Democrats win this special election, because if the Democrats win the special election in Kansas, it'll mean that Trump doesn't have any coattails. It'll mean that Trump's lost his coattails. It'll mean that Trumpism is over. It'll mean that the people of America are fed up with Trump, and that's what they're going to say. All that and more if the Democrats win this special election. Now, Pompeo owned this seat, but he's not there. And the Democrats have poured a lot of money into it. The Republicans the same, and it's fascinating. They've got everything, every hope and dream that the establishment has, that Trump is temporary, is not really president. It's an illusion. Everybody's living a nightmare, and it can all be proven if the Republicans do not hold this seat in the special election. They're hoping that what it's going to show is that there's distrust and anger and frustration with Trump because Trump violated so many campaign promises. Obamacare isn't repealed. There aren't any tax cuts. The wall hasn't been built. And Trump launched a military strike against Syria. All of those things, it is believed that Trump supporters despise, are angry at, and now hate Trump. And we're going to get all the proof in this special election when the results are known. Now, if the Republicans hold the seat, it's going to be suicide watch. Well, maybe not. They'll manufacture an excuse blaming the Democrat candidate or lack of enough money or what have you. But they're really salivating about it. But folks, I think the wall's going to get built. Somehow, some way, a portion of the wall, there will be a structure that goes up, and it will have an observation deck, and it will have a sauna, and it will have hot tubs and stuff. It'll be a tourist attraction. Might even have exclusive Trump hotel suites. You can stay at the wall. You can vacation at the wall. Wouldn't that be cool if that kind of structure went up? Those are the kinds of things Trump's known for. That would really frost him. But in all candor, and I have no evidence I can cite, this is just an instinct of mine, that there is still this wild opposition to Trump institutionally within the Washington establishment, and many of them are still of the mind that they can stop him and render him irrelevant by simply failing to enact his agenda. That's all they have to do to destroy Trump, is just fail to enact his agenda. And that means his voters will blame him for not being able to get things done after bragging during the campaign how he's the only guy that could get things done. So that's the effort. Thwart his agenda, force you people that love Trump to turn on him because he can't actually do what he said he was going to do. That's what is really going on here. And this is what they don't understand. Trump will find a way around him. As long as he convinces his voter base that he's still focused like a laser on all those things and intends to get them done. Let's see, do we have time? Yes, we do. Okay, time to head back to the phones here. It's 800-282-2882. And it's Jeff in Simi Valley, California. Jeff, great to have you with us on the program, sir. How are you doing?
I'm great, Rush. Thank you for having me on. I just got a quick comment on this whole airline situation. Why isn't airlines cannot seem to reserve maybe 3 or 4 seats on each flight in the eventuality they need to put some employees on there in an emergency? That way they're not bumping people off all the time.
I was going through my stack here. There is, let me see if I find it here. There's a story on Just Your Question about why they overbook. What is it about the industry that makes this happen? Here it is. It's the UK Daily Mail. Could you be dragged off your... See, this is the way the news... Could this happen to you? It's just silly. Experts reveal why airlines always overbook seats and what your rights are if you get bumped. And look, there's no mystery here. They overbook because not everybody shows up.
Right. But if they just have... I've been in airports, I can't remember how many times. I'm always hearing them try to ask people, will you take a standby? Will you bump a flight? We'll give you these perks if you take a different plane. If they always seem to be having this kind of problem, why can't they just reserve, like I say, a couple of seats? And that way there's always room for an employee to get on the plane. And they don't have to, have someone kicking and screaming and getting torn off the plane.
Well, I can only surmise. I'd have to guess.
Yeah.
I'm not... The aviation industry, not just airlines, the entire aviation industry fascinates me. These kinds of questions, they make total sense in every other business. Like I said, the airline industry is the only industry that does this. There isn't, I can't think of any other place where you're buying or renting or whatever, a seat to an event where they sell it twice. They don't sell it twice at a football game. They don't sell it twice at a basketball game or baseball game. They don't sell it twice to a soccer game. Movie theater, they don't sell seats twice. They don't overbook it. The airline industry does, and they can show you their reasons, business and statistical, that not everybody shows up. There are people who actually seek. This probably won't surprise you. There are people, passengers, who seek oversold flights, who have no intention of ever going anywhere. They just want to get on a plane and accept the offer of cash and a hotel room to get off the plane. You've got all kinds of people that connive and plan things this way. It's a thing that the airline industry has obviously had to account for. As to the just reserving some seats if they know they're going to have a crew that has to deadhead somewhere. By deadhead, that means fly but not work on the plane. So if you've got flight attendants that you have to have, like in this case, they had to have a crew in Louisville for the first flight out the next day. Because if that flight doesn't go, then that flight not going affects that airplane's movements the rest of the day. My brother David got stuck in New York for 2 days last week. He got back from Israel on a Thursday, was scheduled to fly to St. Louis Thursday afternoon. They had weather in Atlanta and Chicago. It screwed up everything. He couldn't get a flight until Saturday. By then, he stayed because he was going to have to be back in New York for his book tour on Monday. So, that bottleneck happened with one hub shutting down for some hours because of weather, Atlanta. And there was another hub that was affected at the same time. So if they've got a flight that has to go first thing next day, and they have to have a crew on that flight that's not in that city, they have to get the crew there, then they deadhead them on a flight going to that city. That's what was happening here on this flight from Chicago to Louisville. Why don't they reserve 4 seats when they know they're going to have the crew? Because they're not, for some reason, they don't know they're going to need that flight that far in advance to get the crew there. That crew normally would be there on another flight that they have worked. The airlines do not like non-paying passengers on airplanes. They do not like having to deadhead crew to the next city. But for some reason, this crew's flight that was going to get them to Louisville didn't go. So they had to get that crew there anyway. And probably just a culmination of events at the last minute that resulted in this. And you don't want to reserve 4 seats on every potential flight and not sell them, because it makes no business sense. They have a system. They offer people cash incentives to get off if it's overbooked. And normally it works, but when there's a guy like this passenger, then it can come up the whole works. Anyway, I'm not here to defend anything. I'm trying to explain in a logical fashion why it might happen, because there are reasons here that these things happen. And there are reasons that things don't happen, like your question. Why they're not going to reserve 4 seats that are not ever going to be sold on a flight. That just would never happen. Well, I say that, and I'm thinking maybe they could do it with a couple of seats that they could really overcharge. And the later you buy your seat, the more expensive it is. The earlier you buy the seat, the cheaper it is. But then they have, how do you think outfits like Priceline are able to do what they do? You ever stop? And unused inventory. They've made deals, be it cheap tickets or whatever. They make deals with the airlines, and any unused inventory at the last minute is turned over. And if it's a matter of selling it for 10 cents on the dollar or not selling it, they'll sell it at 10 cents on the dollar. But it's all on the seat of their pants. And the Super Bowl sells out a year or more in advance. There's never any question the place is going to be full. Anyway, I have to take a break. I'm way long here. We will continue in mere moments. So I have a question about this special election in Kansas. And my question is, how do the Democrats think they even have a chance at winning this election? How can they possibly hope to win this election? Look, if the Russians were able to tamper with a nationwide presidential election to shaft Hillary Clinton, wouldn't it be simple to tamper with a single congressional election in Wichita? I mean, come on. On what basis do the Democrats think they've even got a chance here? Knowing how Trump colludes with the Russians to screw Democrats out of elections. How come we haven't had a story about that? How come we haven't seen a story about Russian collusion with Trump in these special elections, huh? In fact, what's happened to that story all over the place? And back to the phones we go. This is Julio in San Francisco. Great to have you on the program, Julio. How you doing?
Good. Thank you, Rush, for taking the call.
You bet, sir.
Your pilot that you had on earlier stole a little bit of my thunder, and obviously safety is of the utmost concern. And I think some of the things that are not being touched on is that he did mention the rules and the fact that when a customer or passenger is given a request, or a request is made of them by one of the crew, if they don't comply with that request, that's immediate grounds for being removed at their discretion. And this, what wasn't hit on, I think, is that this passenger chose to escalate the situation himself. He chose not to comply, in which case the staff or crew all went around, asked him to deplane. He refused.
Actually, twice, by coming back on the plane after being removed the first time. That's provocative.
Right, and they have no other choice but to call in the police. And the police at the airport, just like TSA, are to be treated like the police anywhere else, with respect. And if you don't comply with their orders, then what other choice is left? You know, this was of his own making. He could pull on his big boy pants and say, okay, well, I'm just going to have to comply, just like everybody else who's ever been bumped. I mean, my wife and I were on our way to our vacation in Hawaii, and, you know, luggage in place, buckled in, ready to shut the doors. They came to us and said, I'm sorry, somebody else has got to take your chair. And, you know, you just have to, you know, grin and bear it.
Well, yeah, and you're probably right, but in the current atmosphere, that's a tough PR sell. I think this guy that we're talking about, you said you do what you do with the police. He should have called Black Lives Matter if he really wanted to take on the cop. Hang on, folks. The ride is not over. We have another exciting, busy broadcast hour remaining. Get right to it right after this. Having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have. Rush Limbaugh talent on loan from God. Great to have you with us. Broadcast excellence. This is the most listened to radio talk show in America, the most talked about show, the most talked about and discussed host of the most talked about program, and great to have you here. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the program. Donald Trump recorded a robocall for the special election in Kansas today, throwing his weight behind the Republican in a race that the drive-by say is very, very close. And they're all invested in the Democrat winning the special election. It's Mike Pompeo's seat. Because if the Democrats can win the special election, it means the Democrats are going to win back the House. It means the Democrats are going to win back the Senate. It means that Trumpism is over. If the Democrats can win a special election this soon, even before Trump's 100 days are over, it means that the bloom is off the rose and the nation realizes what a mistake they made with Trump and that they can't wait to elect Democrats. That's how this is going to be portrayed if the Democrats win the special election in Kansas today. Here's the robocall that Trump made.
We're going to do things really great for our country. Our country needs help. Ron is going to be helping us big league. But I need Republicans like Ron Estes to help me get the job done. This is an important election. There's really few very much more important, and I need your vote for Ron Estes on Tuesday.
So that's a Trump robocall trying to get out the vote for Ron Estes, running for the seat held by Mike Pompeo, who's now the director at the CIA. And folks, I'm not exaggerating. If the Democrats win this, the media is going to say everything I just said and more. It's going to mean that not even after his first 100 days, the country realizes what a mistake they made and can't wait for every chance they get to vote Democrat again. Make no mistake about it. You people in Wichita in this election, you need to remember that, because that's exactly how they're going to play it if Estes loses this thing. Jeff Sessions went to the border today. Oh, I just saw a headline. I didn't have a chance to click on this. It was at the New York Daily News, and I was looking for something else entirely. And since I don't subscribe, they don't have a search feature. I guess the search feature at the New York Daily News is behind a paywall, which is no big deal. But I saw the following headline. Ruth Bader Ginsburg calls Lindsey Graham one of the women of the Senate. And I didn't have time to click on the link, so I don't really know what that's about. Maybe you could find that story, Mr. Snerdley, and clue me in on that. In the meantime, Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, shows up today in Nogales, Arizona, on the U.S.-Mexico border, to announce new law enforcement guidelines on illegal immigration. Here's the first of three sound bites that we have.
Starting today, federal prosecutors are now required to consider for prosecution all of the following offenses, often not prosecuted in the past. The transportation and harboring of aliens. As you know too well, this is a booming business. No more. We're going to shut down and jail those who've been profiting from this lawlessness. Further, where an alien has unlawfully entered the country, which is a misdemeanor, that alien will now be charged with a felony if they unlawfully enter or attempt to enter a second time and certain aggravating circumstances are present.
And taking it to a felony. Entering the country illegally, going to crack down on the business of transporting and harboring illegal aliens. By the way, just to remind you, there's a couple of stories today about how the level of immigration in many areas of the southern border, I think in Texas, is way, way, way down. And I was going to make a point about it, and one of the staff interrupted me with an unrelated question. It reminds me of what I was going to say. And here, just the threat of enforcing the law is apparently having a successful result. Just the threat, just the administration claiming they're going to enforce the law, prosecute violators, is causing the numbers to shrink dramatically. Here's Jeff Sessions again.
This is a new era. This is the Trump era. The lawlessness, the abdication of duty to enforce our laws, and the catch and release policies of the past are over. In that vein, I'm also pleased to announce a series of reforms regarding immigration judges to reduce the significant backlogs in our immigration courts. Backlogs and catch and release policies have undermined the effectiveness of our law officers' work. Pursuant to the President's executive order, we will now be detaining all adults who are apprehended at the border. They will not be released.
Yeah, you can expect some people to file suit on this, just like these people have done with these judges in Seattle and in Hawaii over the Trump travel ban. Hard-hitting stuff. And all of this, by the way, no new laws are needed for any of this. What you're hearing here is the Attorney General simply saying that they're going to enforce existing law. They're not creating any new law. They're just deciding to prosecute these laws now. And this is right there in the sweet spot of what people have voted for Trump expected to happen. And when they go do it, they don't just do it. They send the Attorney General to make a big fanfare of doing it so nobody can miss it. Here is Sessions, a question from a worried liberal reporter. The reporter is unidentified. And she says, what do you say to people who charge that they're deeply offended by these policies and say that you're using radical means in search of a solution for a problem that you're overreaching on, especially militarization of the border? People live on this border, sir. People work on this border. Why don't you talk to people who actually live and work on the border instead of just Border Patrol and ICE? Why don't you actually talk to people who live here? So it was an effort to get Sessions to acknowledge that some people are offended by this. And here's what he said.
The American people have established a lawful procedure for immigration in our country, a lawful procedure of entrance and exits. We have that right here. I think things are moving in a good direction here. We've made a lot of progress in recent years over ending the illegality. I think the people of this country overwhelmingly want a lawful system of immigration that serves the national interest, one that we can be proud of, one that when somebody waits their turn, they know that they're going to have an opportunity in the future, and that someone who comes in unlawfully doesn't break ahead of them.
So the reporterette here, highly worried that people are offended by these new laws that are overreaching, and there's nothing new here. That's the point. These are just existing laws being enforced, with the Attorney General heading down to Nogales to make the announcement. We're just going to enforce the law. We're going to start prosecuting the law, and well, there's one change. We're converting some of these misdemeanors to felonies because we're serious about this. Hey, you never Trumpers, you can stuff it because this is what Trump was elected to do. And it's clear that Trump is committed to his agenda on this. If look at it this way, if just threatening to enforce the law has slowed the flood of illegal immigrants, think what actually enforcing it will do. Think of this. It could be dramatic. Just the threat has caused the influx of illegals to slow to a trickle in certain areas of the border. And there's one other observation, and I have to make this. In these three sound bites, you heard the Attorney General announce that we are going to be doing things that we have been told for years cannot be done. We've never had explanations. We've just been told that we can't enforce the law as written, that we can't prosecute, we can't go after the coyotes and we can't do it. We've not been told why. We've just told it's not practical, it's not relevant in the 21st century. We can't treat these people as criminals. They're simply seeking a better life. They are oppressed people who are deserting war-torn and poverty-stricken homelands and so forth. But I remember distinctly all these things. We've been told we can't do it. When people say, why not just enforce the law? Why do we even need comprehensive immigration reform, we asked? Why not just enforce the law? We can't do that. No, we need a new comprehensive immigration law. Why? To satisfy the donors? So Sessions is doing what everybody's told us we can't do. He's announced that they're going to do what everybody told us cannot be done. Now, I'm going to move on to this millennial stuff here because I decided if I don't do it when I'm thinking of it here, it's just going to continue to sit here in the unused stack. And what's going to happen is I'm going to eventually get bored with it. What are you smiling at? What are you laughing at in there? Well, you found the story about Ruth Buzzy Ginsburg calling Lindsey Graham one of the women of the Senate. Okay, well, give me a hint here. Did she know what she was doing, or was it a faux pas slip? She was confused. Really? Here it is now. Ruth Bader Ginsburg confuses Lindsey Graham for a woman. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg erroneously labeled South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham as one of the women of the Senate yesterday. Ginsburg's misstatement came in her remarks upon accepting the Allegheny College Award given to her and the late Justice Scalia for civility in public life. Hours after Justice Gorsuch was sworn in to replace Scalia, Ginsburg took to the podium in calling on lawmakers to work together, but mistakenly identified Graham as a woman. Here's what she said. I thought back to the 93 confirmation of my nomination to the court. Hearing was altogether civil. The vote was 96-3. For Justice Scalia, the vote was unanimous. Let's hope members of Congress, the members of the Allegheny College, is already honored, Vice President Biden, Senator McCain, the women of the Senate, Senators Feinstein and Graham. She really did. The women. So it's not that she just identified him as a woman. She lumped him in with the other women. The women of the Senate, Senators Dianne Feinstein and Lindsey Graham, let's hope they and others of goodwill will lead in restoring harmonious workways. It's a Fox News story. Reminds me, looks like the millennial stuff is being shoved aside here again, just briefly. There is a piece at CNN, interestingly enough. It's an op-ed piece by Ilya Shapiro, Senior Fellow, Constitutional Studies at the Cato Institute, Editor-in-Chief of the Cato Supreme Court Review. Now, Cato is a libertarian think tank. So I don't know how anybody there got published at CNN. Somebody at CNN obviously didn't know what they're doing here. Because this piece, I mean, it's right on the money, but CNN would never report. And I know it's just their website. It wasn't on their TV air. The headline is, Democrats have zero leverage after Gorsuch. And Ilya Shapiro makes 5 observations about the confirmation of Gorsuch and how it happened and what it means. And it's all bad for the Democrats. And essentially, it revolves around the fact that the Democrats strategically goofed up. You know the theory that Gorsuch is a non-controversial nominee, that he just too qualified. It was silly to trigger the nuclear option. It was silly to filibuster this guy because now the Republicans pulled the trigger. Now, I'm going to tell you why they did again, why the Democrats did this. But this piece's point now is that since the nuclear option has been triggered, it's 51 votes for every nominee now. And Trump likely is going to have minimum 3 more. Now, here's the way the strategy theoretically worked. that if the Democrats would just go ahead and have enough of them vote for Gorsuch to confirm him, then McConnell would not have to trigger the nuclear option, which means that in the next nominee, that next nominee would have to get 60 votes. And the theory is that Trump, in order to get 60 votes, would have to nominate a moderate. And that the Democrats could have saved the triggering of the nuclear option for somebody they really wanted to stop. Well, the Democrats triggered the nuclear option, and now the rules of the Senate prior to 2003 have been restored. And I want to reemphasize something here. All that this did, the triggering of the so-called nuclear option, was return the Supreme Court to the rules it had operated under for decades prior to 2003. This did not upset long-standing Senate tradition. This, in fact, returned the Senate to long-standing Senate tradition. But because Schumer pulled a trigger that caused McConnell to go nuclear, that means every other nominee to the Supreme Court now only needs 51 votes. That's much easier than getting 60, which means that Trump now can nominate anybody. He can nominate somebody as conservative as Scalia. He doesn't have to go moderate. He can go all the way here because there's nothing the Democrats can do to stop. Now, why did Democrats do it? Well, if you have my excellent memory, you'll remember that last week we divulged the reason. The Democrats believe that triggering the nuclear option was going to so anger their base that the Democrats would win election upon election upon election after having done this. That it would increase their fundraising. In other words, this was done not for any strategy to deny Trump nominees on the court down the road. It was strictly done with the belief that the Democrat base would celebrate this so much that the Democrats are going to win elections that they never even figured out. This is silly. It's a great miscalculation, but that's why they did it. Because strategically, folks, seriously, there was no reason to trigger the nuclear option on Gorsuch. He was going to get confirmed anyway. Well, I know that the Democrats didn't, there weren't enough Democrats in the day to vote for him, but had this nuclear option stuff never come up and all that, he would have been confirmed. Anyway, they blew it. Can't tell you how many ways. Let's take a break. Have to. No choice. Back in a sec. If I were the United Airlines CEO, if I was Oscar Munoz, you know what I'd do? I'd run an ad, and I would use this video. And I would say, our planes are so good and our flights are so popular, we have to drag people off of them. Really, on the Democrats' filibuster, look, I forgot to mention a key element here of their thinking. When they claim that by forcing McConnell and Republicans to trigger the nuclear option, that they're going to generate countless votes, win countless elections, their base is going to love it. The reason for that is that what they're setting up is the idea that Gorsuch lost. He lost the first vote. It wasn't until McConnell changed the rules that Gorsuch was confirmed. And therefore, they're going to say that Gorsuch is not legitimate, like Trump is illegitimately president because of the collusion between Trump and Russia. They're going to say Gorsuch is not really a member of the court. He's not legitimate justice. Illegitimate, in fact, because he actually lost. The Republicans have to trick another election, rig another election for Gorsuch to win. And therefore his rulings, the decisions that he makes, are also going to be constantly questioned as illegitimate and unjust because he's not really a legitimate member of the court. That is what they're setting it. Total resistance to virtually everything. And we'll be back. Hang tough. And we are back. Great to have you with us, El Rushmore, serving humanity simply by showing up here. 800-282-2882 if you want to be on the on the program. There was something on my mind that I was going to mention here coming. The ditto cam, that's what. It was not the ditto cam. I'm sorry, the ditto cam was not turned on. It was a minor faux pas. What was it? No, it'll come to me. One of these brief moments where I have a momentary brain fire interruption. The synapses are interrupted. As I was saying, I want to get to this millennial stuff because if I don't do it now, it's going to forever stay in this unused stack. And there was a new one that got added to it today. And it's this. So let's start with a new one first. It's from Breitbart, and it's according to the latest research, a new report reveals that a significant portion of American women refuse to date men who earn less than they do. Now, depending on your age, you may think this is new, but in truth, there's nothing new about this. This has always been the case. Well, maybe a slight alteration. Maybe dating is what's new. Have you heard the phrase, and look, do not get mad at me here. I didn't create the phrase. I didn't invent it. Have you heard the phrase, women marry up? You've heard that, Mr. Snurp. What does that mean to you? And how long ago did you first hear that phrase? All your life. So you've heard at least 40 years you've been hearing the phrase, women marry up. Men will joke and say they marry up. And most of the time it's a joke, although in many cases it happens to be true, too. In many cases you wonder how the hell a guy pulled it off. Let's be honest. So this is a news story that just gets recycled. A survey conducted on members of a dating website called Plenty of Fish. You ever heard of that website? You have? You've heard of the website Plenty of Fish? Do you know where that phrase comes from? Yeah, when you break up and you're down in the dumps, somebody will invariably say, there's a lot of fish in the sea. You don't need to get heartbroken here. Okay. More than 1 in 5 women, 22%, claimed that they would refuse to date a man who earns less than they do. In comparison, 4% of men and 11% of single people overall claimed that they would refuse to be the breadwinner in a relationship. What? 4% of men and 11% of single claimed they would refuse to be the breadwinner? What? Oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. 4%, yeah, okay. Sometimes the way these things are written, people don't want to be in a relationship that will economically disadvantage them, says Moira Weigel, author of Labor of Love, The Invention of Dating. So that starts all of this. And again, it's nothing new, this idea that women refuse to date or refuse to marry men who earn less than they do. Although it is very sexist. But since women can't be guilty of sexism, you can't really say that. Which takes us to the latest startling revelations about millennials. 2 stories here, both from PJ Media. And one of them is on April 5th. And the other one was from the next day, April 6th. First one, millennial men prefer to be family breadwinners and have stay-at-home wives. Can I take you back to the early 90s? Those of you who have been listening here nonstop for 30 years, you'll remember this when I jog your memory. But throughout the course of this program, there have been cultural upheavals. And during those upheavals, I get calls from people, Rush, when is this going to stop? When is this insanity going to stop? Doesn't matter what the cultural upheaval is. It's just a trend away from what everybody has defined as normal. It doesn't have necessarily to be feminism or anything, just anything that's cultural, be it the coarseness of language, incivility of people getting along with each other, whatever it is, people think it represents deterioration and always say, when's it going to stop? My answer was, after having researched this very thing, for example, why doesn't why hasn't this country just continued to head toward the sewer, with each succeeding generation becoming worse than the previous one? When a generation features debauchery and sloth and all these things, and the next generation a little bit more, what stops it? Why is there a reversal? And the answer, according to research, was that at some point, and it's cyclical, and it's almost, in terms of American history, guaranteed, that every third or fourth generation is going to get fed up with the lives that its parents and grandparents lived and want no part of it. And this is how the downward spiral of cultural deterioration is arrested. At some point, it gets so rotten and so bad that young people don't want any part of the world in which their parents and grandparents lived. And so they forge a new way. Now, I saw this headline, millennial men prefer to be family breadwinners, have stay-at-home. Do you realize, if you go back to 1970 to 75 to 1980, and if a man said this and meant it, he was going to be targeted as a sexist, as a chauvinist, as anti-woman. What do you mean you're going to be the breadwinner? What if the woman wants to be the breadwinner? Who says you get the right to be the bread? It was vicious. Now, we've had all this news about millennials, about how they're still children and they refuse to grow up, and they're still childlike as though life is still daycare, even their first couple of years of college. They're referred to as snowflakes. Gentle snowflakes can't handle any controversy whatsoever. Then you see this. We heard that millennials don't want to buy cars. They don't like the whole culture of buying a car. Driving a car destroys the planet. We heard they don't like buying houses. They'd rather rent. They don't have the money, student loan debt. But now what's happening is, over the recent past, we're getting stories about millennials all of a sudden becoming very interested in buying cars and very eager to actually buy and live in homes instead of renting apartments. And now this, millennial men prefer to be family breadwinners and have stay-at-home. Well, stay-at-home wives? I mean, you can't get more anti-feminist than that. So my question is, are we at a point where we've been before, where a generation refuses to abide by and live by the same rules, standards, behavioral norms of their parents and grandparents? Specifically, might I ask, is the millennial generation the generation which is going to break the back of modern era feminism? I mean, a guy my age, I'm 66, and when I was the millennials' age, sometime between 25 and 34, to say something like this was deadly in terms of relations. It was just deadly. It was deadly politically. You were castigated as a male chauvinist. You're refusing to modernize, refusing to recognize the full value and worth of women. To actually say you want to be the breadwinner, not a co-breadwinner, and that you want your wife to stay home and have kids and raise them and be the mother? I'm just telling you, I'm a boomer. And for that to be said by any of us boomers would have been death, instant cultural death. You couldn't even joke about it. Then the second story that came the next day from the same website. Ready for this? Millennial women re-embrace the homemaker life. So on the one hand, we have millennial guys saying, I don't want my wife to work. I want to be the breadwinner. I want her staying home. I want her raising the kids. She's going to do the job of raising the family, and I'll help her when I get whatever it is. The standard way that it was prior to the modern era of feminism. And then the shocker the next day, women, millennial women say, hey, that's great. I would love to be a homemaker. I don't need to go to work. I don't need a career. I'd be happy to be someone's wife and a mother and stay at home and raise the kid. This is culture shock. Now, I find it fascinating, folks, as one who studies sociology and culture, and I have been one who's asked over and over, when is the culture rot that surrounds us going to reverse itself? Because it always does. It sometimes takes 3-4 generations to bottom out, but it always does. I mean, we had the Puritan era. We had the Roaring 20s and things that cleaned up. You go to the 50s and it's Donna Reed and Beaver Cleaver. So it's a cyclical thing. It doesn't continue downward spiral to the sewer. So I started researching this. I started talking to people I know who have kids in the millennial age, and some of them told me that this is exactly what's happening to their kids and their friends. Even the women who work do it at home. They want to stay home. Even if they have jobs, they're considered stay-at-home jobs or whatever. They want the traditional domestic role that women have always had. I've got to take a break because I'm long, but I think this is fascinating. The great achievement of feminism was to somehow convince the world that it was oppressive to let women stay at home and take care of cooking and the kids and the house and all that. And now look what's happened after, well, what's it been? 40 years of focused oppressive feminism. Millennial women appear to be rejecting it.